While not all studios are so lucky, plenty of big names are fortunate enough to stay active and continually focused on work for well over 20 years. What's rarer than that, however, is staying reliable in the eyes of those early fans. It's something I see all the time, especially as a fan of certain franchises that have experienced big changes as time passed. Fans of early titles gradually lose interest, and perhaps even gain resentment because their favorite IPs have transformed into something totally different from what they initially fell in love with. I get that frustration. But a studio taking games into a different creative direction is one thing. A studio becoming downright fucking despicable towards their own employees, including tenured ones who have been there basically since the start, is another. 2023 has been a great year for video games. We've been getting hit with one quality title after another. Great games have been so plentiful that I plan on making a top 10 list of 2023 instead of my usual top 5. In fact, I'm even considering top 15, but I'll need to think on it more. That's all well and good, but sadly, when it comes to the part of the industry that's about making those games, the situation seems to be the worst it's ever been. Acquisitions, closures, and mass layoffs have been plentiful this year too, even in the face of a few successful unions managing to pop up to combat this mistreatment. However, one studio that isn't lucky enough to have such protection is Bungie. Of course, layoffs unfortunately happen, and there's little any of the employees can do. But the last thing a company's management should do is make the layoff look messy and maybe even malicious. On Monday, October 30th, 2023, the once renowned creator of Halo and Destiny unceremoniously laid off about 8% of its workforce, which doesn't sound like a lot, but with a headcount of around 1,200, that ends up being approximately 100 people. And to make matters worse, we're not talking about any random group of the least experienced employees or anything. Not that it would make the situation less aggravating. Among those who were let go are composers Michael Seacrest and Michael Salvatore, and art director and graphic designer Lorraine McLeese. Seacrest had been with Bungie since Halo 3 ODST as a production engineering tester. McLeese had been with Bungie since 1998, where she started on Oni. And Salvatore has collaborated with Bungie since 1997's Myth: The Fallen Lords alongside Martin O'Donnell. To hit any group of employees with layoffs without notice is bad enough, but the sudden and disrespectful disposal of talented, loyal people who have been with the company for up to 26 years with no intention of stopping truly begs the question of why job security is borderline non-existent in an industry that produces the biggest money-making entertainment medium on the planet. But then again, perhaps that exploitation is why this industry is so profitable. But the bad news still doesn't stop there. One of the worst trends in the world of video game development is layoffs being so sudden that employees sometimes don't even get the news until the last possible second. Forbes writer Paul Tassi has brought additional information to the table over Twitter, stating that many Bungie employees that were fired found out that morning when they were locked out of services and had their logins and email access revoked. And those who did find out earlier through meetings were instructed to not inform others, because they'd supposedly be told through other means. Because of this, many employees were unable to say goodbye to each other or even exchange personal contact information. And to add more unnecessary disarray to all of this, many team managers were not told who on their team was being laid off, and only found out the morning of. Destiny 2 content creator Zavalor posted some messages from an anonymous Bungie employee who was a victim of these layoffs. The messages read, "This morning, my off day, I woke up to a text telling me to make my way to the office for an important meeting. When I got there, the news had already been broken. It was a nightmare. People were crying at their desks, packing stuff up, and I checked my email and got the unfortunate news. I wasn't even told in person. By the time I left, my badge and everything had already been deactivated. I don't know what I am going to do at all. It goes without saying that layoffs simply happen sometimes, and mass layoffs of over 100 people can be tough to organize, let alone do. But there is a right way and a wrong way to handle it. And this level of tactlessness towards the situation is nothing short of extremely frustrating. It's downright cold. Paul Tassi continued to gain more information, stating that the layoff decisions came directly from Bungie management and not Sony. This is not about Sony replacing Bungie people with their own. This could be part of a cost-cutting measure by Sony, but the specific people chosen to be fired were chosen by Bungie higher-ups. Next, many employee benefits, except health insurance, only last until the end of the month if you're let go, meaning laying people off on October 30th gives them only 1 day of additional benefits, which is probably not a coincidence. Thankfully, at least health insurance does continue alongside severance, which Jason Schreier reports will be for 3 more months. The third point here is probably the most suspect. Many employees still had unvested shares in the company that will revert back to Bungie due to those employees being laid off before they could be employed long enough to fully own those shares. And still, it goes on from here. According to Rebecca Valentine at IGN, CEO Pete Parsons allegedly told remaining employees that they're the right people for Destiny 2's continued development. A strange thing to say, as it suggests folks like Seacrest, Salvatore, and McLeese are not the right people. To make the negligence even worse, employees were told that player sentiment towards Destiny 2 was at an all-time low. But this is after months of these employees begging management for improvements to win players back. This suggests that the Destiny team had indeed been listening to player feedback for a while now, but their request to management to take that feedback seriously was falling on deaf ears. The timing of these layoffs is also made worse because they only come about a year after the completion of the company's shiny, huge new headquarters. And if you thought the callousness wasn't bad enough, allegedly Bungie leadership tried to hide the total number of layoffs by obfuscating the numbers of departments affected while also discouraging employees from asking questions or bringing up the topic in company chats. And as one last hurrah from the aforementioned Pete Parsons, he went on Twitter to give a public and very sterile and frigid statement about all the exceptional individuals and talented people he laid off over email and instructed others to not even talk to. Truly going the extra mile here. I look forward to seeing how much his bonus will be. Finally, as the shit cherry on this disaster of a Sunday, it's been revealed in Schreier's Bloomberg article that Bungie's revenue was running at a devastating 45% below projections, which is blamed on weak player retention, partly caused by the poor reception of Lightfall. Because of all this, the next expansion, The Final Shape, will be getting a fairly big delay from its initial February release to June, and Marathon will be pushed to sometime in 2025 as well. Plus, there's new rumors circulating that Bungie is developing a third game on top of everything, which may or may not be Matter, a more whimsical, lighthearted RPG which had leaked concept art and a trademark. Bungie can barely keep one game afloat, and now they're expecting to maintain 3, maybe even 4 if they have both Matter and another IP in the oven like some rumors suggest. Give me a break. Missing financial goals by a whopping 45% isn't just bad, it's fucking catastrophic. Or at least it would be if Bungie was even the slightest bit smaller of a studio and not owned by a platform holder who recently spent an insane $3.6 billion on them, which is starting to look more and more like a ripoff. Especially since $1.2 billion was meant to go towards retaining employees. It's also laughable because it means the projections were made by someone who clearly could not see the writing on the wall regarding Destiny 2's tanking reputation and disastrous internal direction. And speaking of Destiny 2's reputation, I want to talk about that too. Contrary to what you may assume by this video and my clear frustration regarding this whole mess, I'm actually not a Destiny player. I have never touched either Destiny 1 or 2 for a single second. It's why I'm using another channel's walkthrough as my B-roll. But I have a few close friends who have been playing Destiny for a long time, sometimes religiously. I've been on the outside looking in since the first game launched, and I'd like to give my perspective on the game and how it's progressed, purely from my eyes as a spectator. First things first, Destiny is obviously a live service game. Bungie wants players to play this game until the day it shuts down, whether that's 6 months from now or another 10 years. But from what I've personally seen, player sentiment has always been complaining about more or less the same things the entire time, at least from what I could tell while I was standing on the sidelines. I've seen numerous people, including my own friends, saying a mixture of there's not enough story, or the MMO aspects are bad, or the community is toxic, or I started playing late and don't know what to do. But in spite of all of these complaints, one positive always prevailed. One little comment was always tacked on to the end of the list of bad stuff. The comment of, "But the combat is great." It was the one and only major thread players were hanging on to and using as a reason to keep playing. And for a lot of them, it was enough. But then Bungie decided to make more and more content time limited and begin vaulting. It was like they were trying to cut that last thread. A lot of the game's content seemed good, but who cares if that content is good if it can't be played? What good is the combat and gameplay if you're actively taking away opportunities to engage with it? The more content that's made time limited, the more players will feel obligated to log on just so they don't have to wait however many months before they see it again. Because Bungie wants to keep a percentage of their own game inaccessible in perpetuity, like it's all on a fucking conveyor belt briefly coming out of the kitchen before going back in. It's Bungie telling players that for every day they don't log on, the more they'll fall behind and be unable to catch up. This causes player burnout. Forcing players to treat Destiny like a second job will burn them out, and burnout often leads to the longest breaks from the game, if not outright retirement from it. This leads me to their buyout from Sony. When it happened, I wanted to give Bungie the benefit of the doubt, because I don't play Destiny, so I'm not actually intimate with how they run things. I'm just watching from the sidewalk, listening to other people talk about their experiences. But now, I'm starting to feel confident. Sony likely wasted their fucking money. Sony said they don't care about monopolizing Destiny and will allow Bungie to release their games on any platform they choose. They only care about their live service game expertise and want to capitalize on it by having Bungie overlook Sony's several other live service products currently in the works. This is a stupid idea, because it's clear as day now that Destiny is not successful because it has a good business model. It doesn't. Its model fucking sucks. And the game made money in spite of it, not because of it. The reasons Destiny continues to live are the great combat, the goodwill Bungie had from their Halo days, and the sympathy they received while under the thumb of Activision, back when everyone thought Bungie would never be the one to make bad decisions themselves. Not because of the game's model. People were always on Bungie's side, even though they've always had a reputation of being difficult to work with and blaming their publishers for their problems. But now, after a period of independence where things only got worse, The curtains have been pulled back more than ever to reveal the rot that sits up in management. Now all of Sony's future live service games are at risk because they're under threat of being guided by the horrible management at Bungie. If Destiny were made by a slightly smaller studio that did not have the prestige of a franchise like Halo behind it, it probably wouldn't have made it past its first couple tumultuous years. And even if it did somehow, then the vaulting would have finished it. And now Bungie is hemorrhaging players who could have been loyal, big spenders because they're taking content away from them, thinking that they're simply avoiding an over-delivery problem. Let me tell you a very brief story. I mentioned already that I've never touched Destiny, but I have friends who do. I have played other online games for extended periods, like Warframe and Battlefield, but I've made it very clear on this channel that I especially love Final Fantasy XIV. Yes, I am one of those guys who brings up this game every chance I get. I started playing it back in summer 2019, before Shadowbringers came out. Slowly but surely afterward, my friends who played Destiny started asking about my experience with 14, and every time they asked, I gave the honest answer. I loved it. I had hardly any complaints at all, and even if I did, they were very minor. Somehow, the game got better and better as it got more content. I never once felt like I was being misled or getting less than what I was paying for. And 14 is a subscription-based game, so not only was I paying for expansions, I was paying $15 a month for continued access. And the game still pleased me greatly. This flabbergasted them. My friends were genuinely perplexed at the idea that someone would be consistently very satisfied with an MMO, especially after the big changes brought on by multiple expansions. And what are these friends doing now? Well, 2 of them are now on Final Fantasy XIV as well, and a third moved to World of Warcraft after Dragonflight released. And they're all happier for it. This concludes my thoughts on the recent Bungie layoffs. Hopefully those affected will find gainful new employment elsewhere very soon, preferably somewhere with a union. Alternatively, 343 Industries has the opportunity to do the funniest fucking thing imaginable. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.